Well, I've been sharing with you some of the story behind the story when we built the 20 mule team Borax wagons. We actually physically started building the wagons on February 1st of 2016, but when I first went down and met with the Death Valley Conservancy in 2014, that October of 2014, I went back east in search of someone who could build the axles. Now, there was a man, Eli Yoder, that I had been doing business with, and in fact, I had dealt with his father before Eli. And so I had known this company for a long time, and it's Farmerstown Axle in Ohio. Well, I went back and I was visiting with Eli about these wagons, and he said, well, you know, you're not the first one that's come and talked to me about this. Well, that's kind of interesting. And what have you come up with? So, well, you know, everybody wants to kind of take something else and make it work and compromise and do this and do that. And I said, well, that's not what I'm interested in. We are in this deal to make it 100% accurate. And I brought some drawings back to show him the dimensions of these axles. And he studied them a little bit, and he said, well, I've never done anything like this before. But the question from me to you is, can you do it? And he's kind of thinking, you can see the old wheels are turning. He said, well, I don't know if I can do the whole thing. It might take a couple shops to do it. It's going to be expensive. I said, that's not what I asked you. Can you do it? Well, bottom line was, he says, I think I can. So that's good enough. That's what we need to do. So on November 30th of 2015, this is now a year later, I headed back to Ohio to pick up these axles. Now it actually took 3 shops. Eli did the turning of the spindles and the threads, but it took a special foundry to make the nuts and the boxings. Well, these axles are pretty heavy duty and they have a flat bottom, but the center is curved. And so it took a third company that had a high pressure water jet that actually cut that curve into these axles. So that was the 3 companies that were involved in getting the axles so we could actually start. So here's a couple of pictures, and this is now December 3rd of 2015. I have the axles in my hands, ready to work. But the project isn't ready to go yet. The funding isn't in line yet until the end of January of 2016, which I didn't know at that time. But we have the hubs here, and I introduced you Calvin in the last video, and I'm doing these 1 video a month so far. Well, he has spent a year getting his head wrapped around the concept of wheels, and so I started to turn him loose on making these hubs and getting the mortises cut in, and that's what the first short section of this clip is a recap of that process of getting the hubs ready for spokes.
These are the steps we took to bring these hub blanks to a finished size. In a previous video we showed how we took rough oak blocks down to round. We can now use the 3.5-inch hole for our bullnose instead of the rotors. In taking these from the 24-inch lengths to the 20-inch lengths, we left roughly 2-inch long donuts on either end for our chuck to hold onto. Then we faced off the blanks to the finished lengths and turned the ends to their correct sizes. This is the outer end of the hub that will be 13 inches. And when we measure for the diameter, it's actually more accurate to measure the circumference. So we'll take a measurement on the circumference, which will tell us just exactly where we are on our diameters. So once the diameters are correct, we turn the length of the hub between the bands to their correct length. And when we are to the correct length there, we could turn off the remaining excess of the wood. You can see this is the second half of the hub. The first half being the inside larger diameter has already been turned off. It's just a matter of getting rid of the excess wood and taking these down to the finished sizes. So once we have the finished size here and we take off all the rough shavings, we'll actually do the same thing to check our diameters. We'll take our soft tape and measure the circumference and make sure we are on our correct diameters. So to give us a point of reference when we finish turning this, we'll actually put a pencil mark that'll show us where the band is going to be. From here it's just handwork using a heavy chisel. These will be kind of an S-shaped curve when they're finished. It's a common style in wagon hubs. And then once we have that down to its proper size, then we'll go back and we'll work the upper part of this S curve and we'll take it into where the spoke band will be. Now where we have it to where we think we're pretty close, I actually have a pattern made that we can check our curves so that these hubs end up being uniform hub to hub. So here we are at the finished size. From our octagon to our round to now they actually look like a wagon hub. They're quite a little larger. So we appreciate you watching. The next step will be cutting the mortises in where the spokes go. Again, it is a step-by-step process. In the first steps we used what is known as a camelback drill press. It was made by Aurora Tool Works in Aurora, Indiana, and is an old-timer like many of the tools here. This has been converted to an electric motor, but was initially run by flat belts. We built an indexing jig to equally space the mortises to the 16 and 18 spoke patterns that were needed. The first step we took was to remove as much wood from the mortises as possible so as not to overwork our mortiser. We did this by pre-drilling the mortises with a regular drill bit. The indexing jig spaces out the mortises, so we did one side of the mortise first, going clear around the hub, then shifting to the other side of the mortise, and finally taking out the center. You will notice throughout the video that the donuts that we left on the ends of the hub are now used to fasten these heavy hubs into our mortising jig. So now we have the mortises in place. We've taken out a large amount of the wood. So now we're going to shift over to the regular mortising tool. This is a hollow chisel mortiser. We're going to use a 3/4 inch hollow chisel that will square up the edges and true these mortises up so that they actually accommodate the spokes that we're going to put in. The process is the same as a regular size wagon hub, like we would just scale things up a bit. So this is how it works. So here we're cleaning up the edges and just about to finish this hub, and I see somewhere we didn't get video that we actually squared up the backside of the mortises. This is what the hub looked like when they were finished. We set it up against just a normal wagon hub to kind of give you a comparison of the size that's involved here. From here we go back to the lathe And we're going to cut out the donuts. We're going to open up the ends that will take the nuts from the axle. This is on the small front side of the hub, and we'll turn it around 180 degrees and actually do the same thing, because there's a collar on the axle that will be recessed up into the large end of the hub. Now, with our steady rest, instead of just running right on the wood like we did when we finished the hubs, here we put an 1/8 inch metal banding on it to help alleviate some of the wear and grooves into the wood. So here we're just opening up for the nut. We're going to open up the center hole a little larger. We actually took it within 1/4 of an inch finish size of the actual boxing. It's not the complete finish boring, but it is the finish size for the nut recess and the axle collar recess. So here we have the recess for the nut cut, as well as the recess on the back side that will accommodate the collar on the axle. So this is what the front of the hub looks like. This is where the nut will go. And this is the back side of the hub where the collar of the axle will fit. This picture here is 2 hubs. One has been treated with linseed oil, and the one on the right has not yet. We're putting these into a tank under pressure, 60 to 70 pounds. They're taking on about 1 gallon of linseed oil. And from here, we let them set for another couple months, letting them dry as much as possible.
So this is the process of getting these hubs ready for spokes, and they have a tapered mortise to them instead of a straight mortise that a lot of wagon hubs have. So they're kind of a specialty deal. Well, Calvin has 7 more to go because we're doing both Borax wagons and we need 8 wheels. So he's focusing on hubs. So I'm going to take these axles and start the process of actually beginning to build the front axle assembly on these wagons.
One of the first things we did was to take 12-inch wide, 4-inch thick white ash to make the axle caps. Both the front and rear axles have an 1.5 inch drop cut into their centers. So we're going to take these and transfer them over to the axle cap. Each axle is a little bit different, so we make a pattern off of each axle and then transfer that over to the block that is going to fit each axle for the axle cap. We have the whole wagon blueprinted, so we'll take the blueprints for the axle caps, take their measurements, transfer them over to the block that's going to become the axle cap. And you can see the pattern on the bottom that's going to match the axle. So after these axle caps are fitted to the axle, one of the first things we need to do is cut the mortise hole through the center that is going to receive the reach. Now, the reach is the piece of wood that's going to extend from the back axle to the front axle. And this goes through the center of the front axle. These axle caps are 4 inches thick. So we need to go halfway to meet in the center. We've already done the other side. What you're watching here is the second side. We're taking our hollow chisel mortiser and going around the perimeter where the hole needs to be to receive the reach. You can see the lines on the block there that we're following. This table is built on a milling machine table, so it goes horizontal and perpendicular to the bit. So we're just moving the table around to follow the line. There you can see it a little bit clearer. So this is meeting in the center, and when we get all the way through, this block will be loose and we can just pry it out and we'll have our hole where the reach will go. The reach goes underneath the back axle, but it comes through the front axle cap. And when this front axle turns extreme right, extreme left, these corners have to be taken off so that they don't bind or interfere with the reach. So we can take our hollow chisel mortiser, we set it at a 45 degrees, and we're going to take off all 4 corners of this large mortise where the reach is going to come through. And again, we've taken measurements off the original wagons to know how big this taper needs to be. So here you'll see the end result. All 4 corners on both sides have been 45'd off. So through the center of this front
axle assembly will be a kingpin that holds everything together. Well, this kingpin has to go through the front axle. So we're drilling a pilot hole first, and then we'll drill a secondary hole that will actually take the tip of this kingpin. It's an 1.5-inch kingpin, and then it's reduced down in size where it goes through the axle. So we don't want to cut too big of a hole in the axle to weaken the axle, and that's how these holes are done. So when the kingpin comes through the axle cap, we have to put an 1.5-inch hole right through the center of the hole we cut for the reach. Again, we're 11.5 inches deep, so we can't go clear through, so we're going to do the bottom side. We've got the flat square top down on the table, keeping it square. We're going to drill actually from the bottom up. And then we're going to take and turn this over. Well, we have a curved bottom, so what we did here, you can see underneath, we put the axle there, fit the axle cap on the axle, which keeps the axle cap perpendicular where it needs to be, and we'll drill the top part of the hole. Now, since we've got the 1.5-inch bit, there's a bolster that goes on top of the front axle that actually carries the wagon box itself, and it also receives the kingpin. So while we've got this drill set up, we're going to drill an 1.5-inch hole through the top bolster. So this kingpin will go through the bolster, through the axle cap, through the reach, and through the axle, and that will be the hinge for the front axle. All I'm doing here is clearing out the center, make sure we have a straight shot that we can make it squarely in the center. So then we need to make what's called the hounds. We have two sets of hounds on this wagon. The one on the left is an axle hound. The one on the right is the reach hound. The axle hound goes on the front axle, and this is what stabilizes the front axle and also attaches the tongue to the front axle. So after we've got this patterned out according to our measurements, we take our patterns, we just made out a large piece of cardboard, and we're going to transfer these over to 4-inch thick white ash beams. The cardboard isn't real accurate, so we go back through and make sure everything is clean and straight. We're going to check our curves, make sure we don't have any irregularities in it that would tend to follow on the bandsaw when we're sawing these out. So we're just double checking all our marks. Next we go to the bandsaw itself and start sawing these out. They're fairly large pieces of timber, so it takes quite a little bit of wrestling around to get these sawn out. Now, since we're doing two wagons, we have 4 front axle hounds and we have 4 reach hounds for the rear axle, for 8 different pieces of timber. And here you can see we have all 8 pieces cut out. We'll take our time and we'll go through and file and sand and clean them up. Then we go back to our blueprints, and we're going to actually set these up on the floor exactly to the measurements they need to be when they're on the wagon. We're going to take the axle cap, set it in position where the axle is going to be, and then transfer those angles from the axle hounds up onto the axle cap. And we know what angle needs to be cut out for these. These also receive a large square hole because these axle hounds go through this axle cap. Again, we have to do this from both sides. This again is the second side. We have our mortising machine set at the angle that's necessary to receive these so that all the measurements are correct, both for the tongue and for the rear stabilizer bar. You can see this milling machine table is very handy for making these square, straight corners. We get down to the last little bit. This block also can be pried out, and these will be where the axle hounds will fit to. Now the axle hounds that receives the tongue are wrapped in 1/4-inch thick by 4-inch wide flat steel. So we've taken and made these pieces to match the curvature of the axle hounds. So as we take and start to
fit these axle hounds into the axle cap, we're going to take and fit the steel to the axle hounds also. You can see the first one has been done. We're working on the second one here now. These all take 1/2 inch bolts. So I'm taking a long 1/2 inch bit and drilling through. What I do is I go halfway. I have lines marked on the top that allow me to find the right angle. I go halfway through from each side until I connect in the middle, and we have a straight continuous hole that the bolts will go through. So after these are all bolted up, I also need to take and drill out the hole where what is called the queen bolt will go. The queen bolt is what actually will keep the tongue in place when it's in use. So again, I go halfway, I have my holes and I have my mark, and I meet in the middle. And make sure we have a clean straight hole that the queen bolt will fit through. So now that all that is bolted and the holes are drilled, then I go through and do the finishing touches to make sure these axle hounds fit correctly into the axle cap and all have the right taper, the right angles, and of course the right fit. I pull them into place and take them up to where they're tight, double check all my measurements. This one actually was a little tight, so I had to back it back out, do a little more adjusting. So it will fit back in the position that it needs to be. Again, take pipe clamps. We're going to draw it into place. And again, we have pencil marks where these are supposed to be, so we know that they're in the right position. So they're in the position they need to be. I'm going to take and double check, make sure the distance on the back where the stabilizer bar is going to be is correct. The front has a taper also. I'm going to double check that for the tongue. And these turned out to be just right. So this is how the front axle assembly looks and is ready for the rest of the finish ironwork.
Well, as I had mentioned earlier, Bobby called me in April of 2014, and that was the introduction of me into this project. But unknown to me, this was not the beginning of the project. They actually had been looking, when I say they, those of the Death Valley Conservancy, had been looking nationwide for a company or some individual that could build these wagons for 9 years already, to the point that Bobby contacted me. So there was a lot of mulling over and contemplating and planning on how are we going to get this done, and multiple people were involved. So when we started to do this project, some of these individuals started to stop by. They wanted to see the progress that was happening. And that's actually what got me into the YouTube world, was by their request, because multiple people were financially contributing to this project, and they wanted some way to share with them the process and the progress that was being made on these wagons. So I'm beginning to meet some of the folks that are also involved a little bit more behind the scenes in this whole project, and I'm getting to realize there is really quite a close-knit group of individuals, I don't know if I call them a family or not, that all have one purpose: to reconstruct these wagons to preserve the history of Death Valley. So we're about 1.5 years into this project now, and we're going past the stage of planning and drawing and thinking and all this type of stuff. We're actually hands-on. We're going to build these wagons. So I appreciate you coming along, remembering that 10 years ago we were in the midst of building some of the largest wagons that had not been built for 130 years. Appreciate you coming along. Thanks for watching.